Change the plate, change the land, change the future's atmosphere. Put out the fire, put out the fire. Metafoodians unite, this is your choir. Every millet, every fruit, every sapseed, every bean is water on the wildfire of a world we've never seen. Every oil-free bite is a river turning clean. This is not perfection, it's direction. Not pressure, but protection. A week of choices can cool a generation. A company's courage can ignite a nation. Put out the fire, ooh, put out the fire. Echoes and rise, this is your hour. Metafoodians unite, Metafoodians ignite, sharing love in the metazone, light in the path to a cooler home. Put out the fire, ooh, put out the fire. Together we rise, together we inspire.
Welcome to the Planet B podcast, where truth, transformation, and faith converge. Join us as we flip the script on ecological despair, guided by Dr. Sailesh Rao's vision for a compassionate, rewilded vegan world. Let's begin the journey to the greatest transformation in human history.
Welcome to Episode 7, a critical look at the UN IPCC's emissions accounting. I think the best place to start is really with the opening quote. Could you please share the opening quotes of Chapter 7 and share a little bit about why you chose to incorporate this into your book?
The opening quote is by John Barry. And it says, "What do you get when you mix science with politics? Pure politics." You have to understand the history of how this came about. Way back in 1992, when the UN Rio summit happened, they identified three major environmental problems. First was biodiversity loss, the loss of wild animals. Second is ecosystems collapse, which is the desertification of the planet. And the third was climate change. Okay? And they formed three conventions to address these three problems. The Convention on Biological Diversity, the UN Convention to Combat Desertification, and the third was the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. Now, the nations that came together to address this, I think by and large they were sincere. Okay? Even the US at that point was sincere, even though the US was the only country that did not sign the Convention on Biological Diversity. Only major country. The other country that did not sign is the Vatican. These two countries still haven't ratified the Convention on Biological Diversity. So it's as if these two nations, the US and the Vatican, have reserved the right to kill off all the wild animals on the planet. Okay, that's what they're saying. And basically, the US took the stance that the American way of life is not negotiable. The scientists came up with a solution that was quite draconian. So it required rationing everything. So it's all within the same system, right? How do you solve the problem within the same system? So they didn't address any of the foundational issues. They just went ahead and said, to solve the problem, you have to do this. And it's quite draconian. And the conservatives in the US Senate basically rejected it altogether. Okay? So then they decided to manipulate the process so that they can continue to grow the economy. Because what solution the scientists had come up with was, so it was a degrowth agenda, which means no more capitalism, and you have to figure out how to reduce your usage of the planet, right? That's what we have to do anyway. Now, unless you address the foundational issues, which is what I do as a systems engineer, I'm looking at it from a systems angle, and I say you have to address the foundational issues. You have to create a new system based on the correct foundations and make it has to be a solution that's much more appealing to people. Why? It's going to solve the problem. It's going to make all of us healthy. We no longer have to lie to each other, It's no more deception, right? No more deceptions because that's how you collaborate. In any engineering project in which we all have to collaborate to create a product, we cannot be lying to each other. It doesn't work. The team will just fall apart. You can't have competition within the team. You can't have one-upmanship within the team. It has to be a complete collaboration to achieve that overall objective. And the same with the planet. You cannot solve planetary scale problems by having competition between nations, by having divisions across societies. We all have to come together as one species to solve the problem and then help the other species along, right? Because they're dying.
Right.
Yeah, compared to us. So, it's a complete system transformation, but that's not what they wanted to address. They wanted to figure out how to maintain the system. And in order to maintain the system, they had to deceive us into thinking the major problem is climate change. And within climate change, the major issue is fossil fuels. And to solve the fossil fuel issue, you have to grow the economy by creating more electric cars and solar panels and so on. Because if you look at the old transition models, even when you transition from wood burning to fossil fuel burning, the wood burning did not stop.
Mm.
In fact, the wood burning is continued, and it's actually grown more. So we burn more wood today than we did in the 19th century. Right? And simultaneously, we burnt a lot of fossil fuels too. So everything grew. So that's the model they're looking for. It's something that will grow the fossil fuels while simultaneously growing clean energy.
All right. So as we begin, what exactly is the UN IPCC?
The IPCC is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And this was a decision that was made in the late 80s and 90s. How do you study? The politicians said it cannot be just scientists because they'll tell the truth. So it has to be a governmental panel. So the governments have a veto power over the scientists' output. So the scientists are telling you something, and the governments send their politicians to say that line should not be there, that line. So they have line by line veto.
Wow.
Okay.
That alone is a complete planet A system, and you could say that's where the deception would begin.
Correct, yeah. Because the politicians, again, any country can veto any line.
That's so bizarre.
So it's considered to be a consensus. It's a consensus because everybody has agreed to every sentence. Like Brazil and Argentina, they don't want any mention of animal agriculture in this. So they take it all out after COP30, which was the 30th convention of the parties. They took out any reference to fossil fuels also. So there is nothing there that would offend anybody.
So you're saying that in the most recent COP, which is the gathering of the nations to address climate change, there's nothing discussed about animal agriculture, but now they're even saying we don't even want to talk about fossil fuels.
Correct, yeah. So now, so now I'm telling the fossil fuel activists, hey, now you know how we feel, right?
Yeah,
We've been
join the party.
Join the party, yeah. So there's no, animal agriculture has been massaged into looking like it is not the leading cause. The data is already there. So anyone who is well versed in data science, who can read the data, can conclude that animal agriculture is the leading cause of climate change because the data is already there.
Right. So it's almost like by the scientists and the governments working together, the governments can mask
Correct.
the data or even change it. So, and that's kind of leads into the next question is, what influence does the UN IPCC have over climate policies and then potential government intervention?
Oh, it has total influence over government policies, climate policies among nations, because the governments basically rely on the IPCC's reporting to implement their policies. Okay?
Right.
Even there, of course, the implementation is all voluntary, meaning there is no enforcement mechanism within the IPCC. The IPCC is saying, okay, this is what we think is happening. And the governments then go and implement policies based on the IPCC's reports. Now, there is a similar scientific body for each of the conventions. There is a scientific body for the Convention on Biological Diversity, scientific body for the UN Convention to combat desertification. And the IPCC is for the climate change. Okay. Now, initially, all three conventions were meeting every year. And then in the mid-90s, they chose that climate change will meet every year, but the other conventions will meet only once every 2 years. They made the other conventions seem like they're lesser problems.
Based on the planetary boundaries, those are much more important.
Absolutely.
Right.
They are the
Right.
major
So-
problems. Climate change is actually number 4 out of the 7. Biodiversity loss is number 1, right? And desertification comes under all of them. It's basically what land use change, water use, all of that comes under desertification. So that's actually worse than even climate change, right? When you put it all together. So climate change to me is the fever that the earth has. And yet it got the most billing, the most attention, because it was being framed as an economic growth story, a green growth story. And the other conventions, the scientists would meet, they would come up with a resolution, and it would be completely ignored because the media paid no attention to it, or very little attention to it. Like the Convention on Biological Diversity said that we are going to halt biodiversity loss by 2010.
Here we are.
Right? They're going to halt it by 2010. No more biodiversity loss. And the forests are going to grow beyond that. It didn't happen. So 2010 came and went. And then they changed it to 2020. So it's like, they keep moving the goalposts. Okay? And you'll see that they pass a resolution. The US did not sign it. And now, all the other nations are saying the US didn't sign it, so there's nothing that's really going to be implemented. So nobody implements anything on whatever the resolution they passed. Okay? It's like, it's empty. To me, when I was working on the internet, if I were to go to a meeting where nothing happens, I would stop going.
Right.
Because to me it's a total waste of time, right? And this is why after Glasgow, I said I'm not going to go anymore to even COPs after COP26 because I felt like they're not doing anything seriously. And it's only thanks to Loving Hut and Supreme Master team that I went to COP30.
When you went this year, did you see anything different? Did it make you feel positive or motivated about this Planet B solution?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I'm glad I went to this one. After I went, I realized that, things have changed a lot. People who are coming to the COPs are realizing that nothing serious is happening there. And they're looking for real solutions. And so the fact that we were there with the Planet B solution was very important. And I could sense there is a hunger among the delegates to do something serious.
That's wonderful.
So I'm glad I went, and I'm looking forward to going to COP31.
Yes.
And COP31 in Turkey, we need to create a presence not only in the green zone but also in the blue zone, where we present this Planet B solution and make it freely available to everybody, to examine and to use, right? Because people are looking now. They are desperate. Like I use the analogy of the metro in India. Like when the Kolkata metro was built, people saw it as a way to make money. And so the Kolkata unfortunately has a metro that only has 2 lines, one going north-south and one going east-west. It was the first one that was started in India in 1975. And it's a mess. So it's left a whole bunch of holes in the ground everywhere. Okay, it's still a mess. Whereas the Delhi metro was started in 1990s. And when it was started, the politicians really wanted a solution because they were getting stuck in traffic. So they had to deliver something that actually worked for people. And so they took their hands off the engineering project and said to the engineers, go do it. And now the Delhi metro is bigger than the London Underground in terms of the total train tracks that are there, right? And it carries 50% more people than the London Underground on a daily basis. And 99.97% of the trains arrive within 1 minute of schedule. So it's well run, and the people of Delhi love it because now they can tell you, I'm going to be there in 40 minutes. And they know they'll be there in 40 minutes. Yeah, it's reliable and it's well used, right? So I feel like the Delhi metro moment has happened for climate change.
Yeah,
Okay?
that's
People
wonderful.
are looking for real solutions, not fake ones.
In this chapter, you go through a lot of the data just to prove to people how silly this information coming out from the UN IPCC is.
Right.
So according to the UN IPCC, what percentage of global greenhouse gas emissions are caused by animal agriculture?
Well, we have to look at what percentage of the emissions or what percentage of the warming
Right.
is caused by different sectors. And in the chapter, I look at the cumulative effect. So which is like what percentage of the warming, okay, not the annual emissions. So when you look at what percentage of the warming is caused by different sectors, according to the UN IPCC, it's 48% is caused by fossil fuels and 13% is caused by industry. So totally 61% is caused by fossil fuels and industry put together. Okay. And animal agriculture is causing 24% and 5% from other agriculture. And then there's some percentage for forestry and other sources, right? So majority is caused by fossil fuels and industry, according to the UN IPCC's accounting. Now I looked at their accounting and I said, this accounting is not telling you the truth. Because it's a false accounting. It's an accounting convention that they all agreed on. Okay, and they agreed that they will measure certain gases and they would equate them to CO2 using 100-year averaging of the impact of the gases. Okay, and they didn't count all the gases, so they only counted 4 of the gases, and there are 11 such emissions that we have to consider, not just 4 of them. So they ignored all the cooling gases. They only looked at some of the warming gases. And then the averaging that they did was to make certain gases look less powerful than they really are. Right? So it's this kind of manipulation of the accounting convention. The accounting convention was established in the 90s. When we didn't know much about climate science. So there were just a few gases that they knew about, right? That's when they came up with the accounting convention. And then they clung to it. Even though the science has progressed, it's the same convention that's being used to report. Okay, and that makes it look like fossil fuels are the leading cause of the warming. And this is why Jared Bishop's work is so important, because he said, let's look at their own data, because the IPCC has scientists who are coming up with the data on what is really causing the warming. And so scientists have come up with 11 different effects. Okay? Plus carbon opportunity cost, which is the 12th one. 6 of them are warming gases, and the IPCC convention only uses 4 of those 6. And then 5 of those are cooling effects, which the IPCC ignores in its reporting convention. Now the governments are only looking at the summary for policymakers, which is where the reporting happens. Right? So when you look at all 11 of these effects, as Jared Bishop did, you will see that fossil fuels have only caused 18% of the warming. 52% came from animal agriculture. So it just flips everything around.
How are they saying that first part, where the animal agriculture is only contributing 25% roughly, and then now Gerald Bishop has flipped it over? What's the missing link there?
Well, there are 3 things that are different. Okay, one is Gerald Bishop uses the same kind of accounting for all CO2 molecules that are emitted. The CO2 is one of the main greenhouse gases. So he uses gross accounting for both land use change CO2 emissions and for fossil fuel CO2 emissions. Whereas the IPCC uses net accounting for land use change and gross accounting for fossil fuels. And by doing that, it amplifies the fossil fuel emissions and it attenuates the emissions that come from land use change. And to me, that is like saying that the animal agriculture industry is getting credit for photosynthesis on the planet, whereas the fossil fuel industry does not get credit for that.
And can you explain a little bit about what you mean by that statement?
Yeah. Net accounting means that if you deforest, say, 100 acres here, okay, and then you abandon because you want to grow some more crops on that land, okay,
Right.
and then you abandon 70 acres over there because there is nothing growing anymore on that land, it's become unproductive. You only have to account for 30 acres. So they pretend that you only deforested 30 acres.
Right.
Even though you deforested 100 acres. That's
Seems
called
a
net
little-
accounting. Right?
Seems a little sneaky.
It is sneaky. Yeah, it's sneaky. From an engineering perspective, it makes no sense, because to me, CO2 is CO2. You emit CO2 by deforesting 100 acres, you account for it. Now, if nature created photosynthesis on the 70 acres you abandoned, you have to credit nature with that, not the animal agriculture industry. So by doing net accounting, we are saying to the animal agriculture industry, you don't have to worry about the land that you abandoned, making sure that it's even productive. You can just abandon that land, but you get credit for that when you deforest.
Right. And then that land that's being abandoned has mostly been monocultured,
Correct.
and that's what destroyed it in the first place.
Well, it's like the nation is saying, I abandoned it. I mean, what does that really mean? There are still
Right.
cows walking around there, okay? If any little grass grows there, it's being eaten. So it's maybe desertification, right? It got desertified, so I abandoned it.
Right.
In which case, there's nothing growing there. So why are you pretending that that's going to compensate for the land that you deforested? It's this kind of accounting gimmickry that makes it seem like animal agriculture is benign compared to fossil fuel burning. Right? So that's the first one that he found. So Jared Bishop uses gross accounting for both. Okay, so which means it's like taking the CO2 emissions from human sources and apportioning it differently. Okay? So animal agriculture gets more of the CO2 emissions from human sources than the IPCC's way of doing it. Secondly, he uses the heating caused by methane as it's measured by the IPCC today, okay, as opposed to averaging the impact of methane over 100 years. Right. So there is something called effective radiative forcing, which is the IPCC is saying the increase in methane levels in the atmosphere today compared to what it was in 1800, that increase has caused this much warming. So Jared Bishop uses that instead of hypothetical averaging over 100 years. And by doing that, the impact of methane tripled compared to the way the IPCC was doing it. Okay? Methane is actually much stronger as a warming gas than the IPCC is pretending. Okay, that's what that means. So that's the second one. The third one is that Jared Bishop uses all 11 of these heating and cooling effects instead of just 4 of the heating only. So if you do partial accounting, it looks like something else. But if you do full accounting, you'll see the true impact. And so what happens with fossil fuels is that fossil fuels emit not only warming gases, they also emit a lot of cooling gases. And so the cooling is masking some of the warming caused by fossil fuels. Now this is the Faustian bargain of fossil fuels that Hansen has written about. So it's well known, and yet it's not accounted for in the UN IPCC's conventions. When you take that into account, you realize that fossil fuels have caused a lot of warming, but they've also caused a lot of cooling. And the cooling is masking the warming. Which means that if we stop fossil fuel use today, if I wave a magic wand and eliminate fossil fuels overnight and replace them with solar panels and electric cars, the heating on our planet will increase by anywhere from 50% to 87% within the next 2 to 3 weeks.
It's a shocking statement because it's basically, it goes against everything.
Well, it's the
modern
fact. Yeah.
Right.
It's a fact, right? It's the fact that I'm telling you. That's in the data that the IPCC has already published. Jared Bishop's paper is based on analyzing the IPCC's own data. So he's pointing out 50%, and then when I add Jim Hansen's update on the CO2 sensitivity, it goes from 50%, it goes to 87%.
Right, and I want to get into that too. So you have Joe Bishop's data, but then yours goes all the way to 87. So
right.
How is your reporting statistically and accounting for various resources and gases get to that 87%?
Well, all I did was to take the spreadsheet that Jared Bishop has in his paper and tweak one parameter. The parameter I tweaked was the CO2 sensitivity. So CO2 sensitivity is, IPCC is using 3 degrees Celsius as CO2 sensitivity. Let me explain what CO2 sensitivity is. If you take a planet, and in a planet Earth, and you keep everything constant, so all the other gases are the same in the atmosphere, and just double the CO2 in the atmosphere, and then you measure how much did the temperature increase at equilibrium. Okay, so that's known as the CO2 doubling sensitivity. It's a parameter that's in every model. And using that, they decide how sensitive the Earth is to CO2 and to all the greenhouse gases. Okay, because effectively what that does is, if it's 3 degrees Celsius in the model, it says, which is what the IPCC average is, 3 degrees Celsius. Then it says that the heating is so much and the cooling is so much. And the cooling is masking some of the heating, and the net heating is what you're seeing. Okay, the net heating stays the same, right? Now, if I increase the CO2 sensitivity, that means the actual heating is much larger, and the cooling is also much larger.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And what Hansen pointed out in his paper, Hansen and his colleagues, again this year, March of this year, is that the CO2 sensitivity that the IPCC has been reporting on is actually undercounting the true CO2 sensitivity of the planet. Based on the 2023 and 2024 warming that we are seeing, it's been unprecedented warming. The last 3 years have been the hottest years ever. If you look at the average over 2023, 2024, and 2025, we've exceeded the 1.5 degrees Celsius limit, right? And if you look at the temperature data, these three stick out compared to all the previous years. And they stick out like that because the explanation that Hansen came up with is that it's the International Maritime Organization, I think it's IMO. They reduce the sulfur content of fuels that can be burnt on ships. They put a limit on that. Previously, maritime fuel, you could burn anything you wanted. And people were burning whatever was left over in the refineries. Whatever crude oil you get out of the ground was ultimately all getting burnt or turned into plastic, right? So it's polluted. And so ultimately all getting burnt because whatever was left over in the refineries was being put on ships and burnt there. Now, when the IMO put a restriction on the sulfur content of fuels that can be burnt on ships in the open seas, that reduced the sulfur dioxide emissions over the ocean. And sulfur dioxide is a cooling gas. That's a byproduct of burning fossil fuels. So suddenly the sulfur content above the ocean decreased, and they're measuring it. They're measuring it in the loss of reflectivity above the ocean. So anyway, Hansen and his colleagues came through, did a lot of calculations to show it's an experiment that we unwittingly did because of the IMO's restriction on sulfur. And by doing that experiment, we have established worldwide that the CO2 sensitivity is closer to 4.5 degrees Celsius and not 3 degrees Celsius, which means that the climate system is much more sensitive to greenhouse gases than we thought, okay, according to Hansen. Now this means that the cooling effect is much more than we thought, and the warming effect is much more than we thought. So by tweaking that one parameter in the spreadsheet, the net heating from fossil fuels dropped from 18% to 2%. In the industry went to 0%. Okay? And animal agriculture went up to 66%. And that's the second set of data that I showed. And essentially, what that is saying is that the cooling effect of fossil fuels is much more than we thought. And so the warming effect is also much more than we thought, which means that if I wave a magic wand and eliminate fossil fuels overnight, the planet will heat up by 87% within 2 to 3 weeks.
So basically everything that the IPCC is stating in these things that are being shared at things like COP of eliminating fossil fuel use, it's based on the data. It's a complete fallacy, and actually it could blow up the planet.
Well, we have to eliminate fossil fuel use eventually because all that heating that the fossil fuels are causing, we haven't experienced it yet. Right? It's waiting to hit us on the head. It's going to double, literally nearly double the heating on the planet if we experience it fully. Okay? And so we have to eliminate that. And so I'm saying, if you're working on fossil fuel elimination, please continue.
Right.
But for heaven's sake, go vegan as quickly as possible. And tell people to go vegan as quickly as possible. Because when you go vegan, then you release that land, 40% of the land area of the planet, and on which we can bring back the forest that will suck down that CO2, which is much more powerful than we thought.
Right.
We have to suck down that CO2 and store it in the ground. And then the elimination of fossil fuels can be accomplished without heating us up.
So that can be the best way to reduce the fossil fuels is just over time. But the immediate need is the animal agriculture issue.
Exactly, yeah. Fossil fuels elimination should happen slowly, over a 30-year period. But the elimination of animal agriculture should happen instantly, within 1 year or so, right? I mean, as quickly as possible, we should do this. That's the right solution to not only climate change, but to all of the other problems we're facing. That's the right way to solve it from a systems engineering perspective. Okay.
Right. So the question now is have you been in contact with the UN IPCC, and what is their response to your data?
Well, we have written an open letter to the IPCC. It's published on our website, and a lot of people have signed it, and it's gone to the IPCC. I've sent it to the chairman of the IPCC, and I sent it to a whole bunch of chief scientists at the IPCC. And so they're all aware that we know, you know. So basically, we have to tell them, listen, folks, I mean, you may think we are all stupid, but we understand data too. You know, some of us can read the data. We understand how to read data. And so we have reaching our own conclusions, and it's being published in papers now. It's not just, you know, one person saying it, right? It's being published in papers now. So pay attention and do the right thing. You know, tell the public what is really going on. We have to address animal agriculture as quickly as possible. And if you tell the public that, and let them make a decision if they want to do it or not.
So the masking has to come off from the government side.
Yeah. The masking of the data, you know, massaging the data to make it look like something else. Yeah, I mean, all this deception has to go, right? It's like, you know, pretending that animal protein is superior. I mean, all this nonsense, right? Protein is protein. You know, this sort of thing. It's like, all of this is used to weaponize food, you know, and basically it's for class warfare. And I'm saying class warfare is over. If we are still going to be engaging in class warfare while trying to solve what's happening on the planet, you will never succeed. That's like having competition within your team when you're trying to accomplish an objective. Right. No, you have to collaborate. We are all one species. So let's work as if we are one species trying to solve the problem.
So would you say that that's the solution to overcome this kind of corruption and false data, is just to come together?
To come together, look at the data together. Let's, you know, and people are publishing it now. So let's figure out what is really the truth. Okay. And I'm pointing out to you that this is my reading of the data. And my reading of the data is saying, go vegan as quickly as possible. Not just climate data, but all the data. Okay. I mean, all 7 planetary boundary transgressions are screaming at me to go vegan as quickly as possible.
All right, that's wonderful. If anyone was watching this and maybe had connections with that body, the UN IPCC, what would you say to them?
Well, tell the IPCC to change its conventions to report the truth. Right? And I'm sure the governments are going to object, okay, because right? It's just politics. I mean, it should not really be an intergovernmental panel on climate change. It should be a species level climate change body, science body, right? Not divided according to nations and with politics put in there.
All right. And this goes back to what we were talking about in an earlier chapter with the open sourcing.
Yeah. I'm grateful to the scientists who have been working on this, right? Because they have been open. They have been trying to publish the data. Okay? And when it comes to the politicians and the vetoing process, that's when the massaging happens. This convention, I'm sure, was not the idea of scientists. This convention was cooked up by some politicians. I'm pretty sure. Right? Who said, let's do it this way. Let's massage it this way so that it looks like it's like that, right? And yeah.
Wonderful. So would you like to share just any closing words as we wrap up episode 7?
Everything that's there in the chapter is referenced to a peer-reviewed article that you can go and look up the original data. So I'm trying to be as open as possible with the work that we are doing. Yeah? And saying that the data itself is screaming at us to go vegan as quickly as possible. But the good news is there is a solution. There is a planet B. And that's, I think, one of the most important lessons from this chapter.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Next episode, we're going into chapter 8, which is the worst planetary boundary transgression. So this all ties together. So thank you so much, Dr. Rao, and we'll see you again soon.
This has
The house is burning, but we're still sitting in the glow. Phones charged, lights on, pretending we don't know. But the forest is silent, the river's running low, and the flame on our plates is the strongest fire we throw. Put out the fire, put out the fire. Echoes and rise, this is your hour. 7 boundaries broken, the earth pushed past the line. Climate, land, species, fresh water, chemicals, nutrients, oceans in decline. Not danger, disaster in real time. Put out the fire, ooh, put out the fire. Metafoodians rise, this is your power. And here in India, one truth stands the same. Milk is not just milk, dairy feeds the flame. Cows and methane, fields and forests turn to grain. Politics, culture, carbon, all wired to the same chain. Every cup of curd is heat in the air. Every block of butter is a forest repair. It's not a small habit, it's a planetary affair. Put out the fire, put out the fire. Echoes and rise, this is our hour. Energy fixes half the hurt, Dr. Rao made that clear. But food fixes the other half, the half that's burning here. Change the plate, change the land, change the future's atmosphere. Put out the fire, put out the fire. Metafoodians unite, this is your choir. Every millet, every fruit, every sapseed, every bean is water on the wildfire of a world we've never seen. Every oil-free bite is a river turning clean. This is not perfection, it's direction. Not pressure, but protection. A week of choices can cool a generation. A company's courage can ignite a nation. Put out the fire, ooh, put out the fire. Echoes and rise, this is your hour. Metafoodians unite, Metafoodians ignite, sharing love in the metazone, light in the path to a cooler home. Put out the fire, ooh, put out the fire. Together we rise, together we